All right, we are back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast, talking New York Mets baseball. Joining me today, we talked to him last year about the Mets. He has his own Mets blog, the Apple NYM. He's also the host of the Amazing Pod. Tim Ryder is back. Tim, how are you?
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me back.
Not a problem here. And I want to mention before we get started here, we're recording on Friday, July 1st, so we're not going to be able to talk too much about what's happening with this Texas series over the weekend here, but give me your general take here. That in fact, we enter the third month of the year, and the Mets enter the weekend here, enter July with the National League's best record.
I mean, they got off to such a hot start that, any, setbacks that they've experienced, and of course, Atlanta getting real hot for a period of time, they've been able to withstand that. But I think, it took them till the end of June to finally lose 3 games in a row, which is awesome. But losing 3 in a row certainly did. It focused the microscope a little bit more as far as what this team needs to really hang with some of the elite teams in the majors. And I think they have not only the cash and the motivation to go out and hit those marks, but this isn't a flash in the pan type roster or full roster. It's very, very reinforced. And once it gets all healthy, I think it should be a force.
Yeah, I mean, we're recording, obviously, like after they lose the series, the 4 to Houston, they lost 5 of 7 here. I feel like there's a lot of panic going on here, especially after it happened last year. But like the sense I sort of got, I don't know if you agree with me, is that this is a much different team than last year's was in terms of where they are health-wise, and B, they feel like they're going to be more aggressive at the trade deadline than they were a year ago.
Oh, absolutely. Health-wise, and even that's still missing, Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer. They just did such a good job of creating depth this offseason, so that, if they saw something happen like last year where, the bench mob takes form and there's so many IL stints, they were prepared for that. And I think still there's holes to be filled and stuff happens over 162 games. And I think that, they're very prepared to make all the pushes they need to make at the trade deadline.
Yeah, absolutely here. I think the big key for me, I think the biggest difference, aside from the players here, is the fact that Buck Showalter is here, and Buck is sort of a calming presence in this dugout and has them better prepared fundamentally. They seem to be able to weather adversity better. What do you think about how Buck has impacted this team, what he's brought to the dugout?
Just the overall calm that we've seen from this team when their backs are against the wall. I mean, even from what players were saying, and this is not a knock on Louis Rojas. I think he's going to be a great manager one day in the majors, but, he was thrown into the Mets job. And as even-keeled everyone said he was, stuff spiraled. We saw that firsthand. And I think the almost rock-solid effect that Buck has on the clubhouse, there's no wavering. There's no panic. There's no, at least not that we see. He's made decisions that have backfired on him, but I think that's part of the game. We've seen bullpen calls that have been either premature or maybe a little too late in some cases, but, that's just a manager trusting his players. I think everyone knows that every decision Buck makes, there's reason and logic behind it. And, the ultimate goal, I should say, is to win the game. And Buck's, his focus is only on that. And that's really, really reassuring. And that's, again, not to say that former managers were being pulled away from that focus, but the overlap between the front office and baseball operations that bleeding into the clubhouse and becoming too much at times, that really hasn't seemed to happen with Buck. And I think that's probably the biggest step that, that clubhouse has taken with Buck at the helm.
Yeah, I mean, you also mentioned the clubhouse here. It's definitely been aided by some of these newer rivals here. Max Scherzer, who, as we're recording, has announced he's coming back to the rotation on Tuesday in Cincinnati. That'll be a big help. Starling Marte, Mark Canha, and Eduardo Escobar, name a few here. I feel like just the air of accountability in this club, I think, is improved significantly. And we don't have any more stuff with, like, the raccoon fights. We don't have all of the nonsense last year about how they were tone deaf, what was going on around them. I feel like it sort of has brought this professional. I feel like they've also, most of them made good impacts on the field as well.
Oh, for sure. And the veteran presence can't be understated. And I think the Mets really went out and made a point to address that, not only talent-wise, because there was a lot of talent in the core that was here previously, but, maybe those guys weren't ready to be relied on to be the the front and center, ready for prime time guys. Bringing in not just reinforcements, but battle tested, veteran, consistent reinforcements in the guys like Canna. And I know Escobar's had a really, really inconsistent start so far, but what he's put together over the last few years has been, your 250-ish, 800-ish OPS with a lot of power potential. And, I'm hoping that he comes around, but even the presence that he brings when he's slumping, and you see that, and you see him, first one up top of the steps, congratulating the guy, taking a helmet and putting it back in the rack for him, whatever the case is. And that stuff is contagious. That kind of solidifies that team mentality. And it's been really cool to see.
Certainly has. And I think another big key to this team's emergence this year has been the renewed excellence from Jeff McNeil, who last year got sort of lost his way. I did feel like after he made the All-Star Team in 2019, sort of changed the power-heavy approach, and I feel like this year he's gone back to the approach had him hitting over 330 the first half, where he's contact-oriented here. And when you've seen the guys in the back line, so I feel like Jeff McNeil's become very important to this team.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you look at a player like Jeff McNeil and, I guess presumably what the last front office had him trying to do, break it down to its simplest form. In what way does Jeff McNeil provide the most value to this team? With his contact profile, it's just putting the ball in play. That's what is going to bring the Mets the most value out of Jeff McNeil. And how that route got, went off path or off the chart or whatever you want to say, I'm not sure. Of course, we weren't in that room, but whatever he's gotten back to, and that's just, again, putting the bat on the ball. It's, you see the dividends it pays. And you see, I want to say he's probably still top 20 in the majors in F4. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yeah, he's back to being Jeff McNeil, and that's just such an advantage for this Mets lineup, wherever you put him. I don't even mind him at the bottom of the lineup because it kind of keeps things moving.
Yeah, and another guy who's really taken a big step this year is Brandon Nimmo, because obviously when they brought in Starling Marte in the offseason, they said, okay, he's going to be the center fielder, Nimmo will go out to a corner. Then in spring training, Buck says, we're going to play Nimmo in center, and there was a lot of raised eyebrows, playing in Nimmo's ego, but to his credit, he's improved significantly defensively. He's had a good year at the plate. How important do you think it is for the Mets that Nimmo has just shown that he can actually handle center field as opposed to having to be replaced?
He had one really bad year in center field. I believe 2020 in the shortened season, his advanced metrics were awful, worse in the league. Those were his first, I guess that was his first time putting up negative OAA at any outfield position. And since then, he's put in, again, outside perspective, it looks like he's put in a lot of work to improve out there. His angles to balls are better. I'm not sure if they're starting him in a little bit more shallow, kind of letting him get to those bloopers and or those short fly balls or shallow fly balls, and it's paid off. And his arm is accurate offensively. Forget about it. He's still that high OBP guy. He's also sending frozen ropes into the gaps on a pretty much regular basis. If I'm the Mets, I'm knocking on his door immediately to see what they can do about it in season extension.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of the extension, that's definitely something happening in the offseason here. And one guy will probably be in line for an extension in the near future, if not this offseason as well, is Pete Alonso, who right now is leading the league with 69 RBIs. The Mets as a franchise never had an MVP. And obviously, what Paul Gold was doing in St. Louis. He's been ridiculous here. But, how legitimate do you think Alonso's chances are here to actually win the MVP?
Well, if he goes on the tear that he went on in the second half of 2019 to get up to 53 homers, if he breaks 50 again, and Goldschmidt's having a monster season, I'm not 100% if that's sustainable. Just, he was that hitter at one point. He's getting up there in age, and I hope that he can sustain it because I'm a big Paul Goldschmidt fan. But, yeah, like you said, the Mets have never had an MVP. Pete certainly, he's upped his game, and not just the power game. It's almost like Jeff McNeil's style rubbed off on him. When he needs to lean on contact, he can. When he needs to go the other way with two strikes or shorten his swing up on, he can, and he does. And, guys are still attacking him with that breaking stuff on the outer half of the plate. going in on his hands, they're starting to learn that that's not always going to work because he does a real good job of turning him inside out. But yeah, the way that Pete's developed as just an overall hitter, not just a slugger, extremely encouraging. And yeah, if he can keep that together and stick this, keep this slash line in order and still keep on hitting home runs, breaking 40, even 50 area, that's a monster season. If 70 RBIs at the All-Star break, let's say he does break 130. Let's say he even chance breaks 140. It'd be very, very tough. I know, RBIs are a circumstantial stat, but, for the voters, for the BBWAA voters, I think it'd be very, very tough to ignore that, even with just a magic year that Goldschmidt's having.
Yeah, and in terms of also having a massive year for the Mets, I mean, I don't think the Met fan confidence in Edwin Diaz has ever been higher because, he's been excellent this season. You can see that Buck Showalter being there has gotten more out of him and made his usage seem more better here. I feel like that, obviously, his slider has been ridiculous this year. Like where is your confidence level with Edwin Diaz right now?
Oh, through the roof. His stuff is just so nasty. I've talked about it a bunch on my podcast, Simply Amazing. It took him some time to go from being just a thrower to a pitcher. The confidence that he has, not only in his four seam, which, years ago, you remember when he first got here, his four seam has a lot of movement. It moves like a sinker almost. It goes side to side just so much. He kind of had to rein that in and harness that, keep it not only on the plate, but off the middle of the plate. And, he's been able to do that extremely effectively. You look at his slider, which a couple of years ago, if he wasn't feeling it, he wouldn't lean on it. It's always been absolutely nasty, but the confidence that he has in his slider now, and I think he said it in a couple of post-game interviews, like, oh, how does the slider feel tonight? Just one word answer, nasty. And, it's such a weapon that, he can use it against the best hitters in baseball. And these guys are, swinging a toothpick up there. And it's really, really fun. And, yeah, I think he's a surefire Hall of Fame, easy, take it easy. Surefire All-Star selection going into the middle of July. And, the step forward that he's taken and what his contract status might be moving forward, it's all very intriguing stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned the All-Star Game. It's coming up soon here. I think it's actually later than usual. I feel like towards the 2nd, 3rd of July or July 19th here. And the Mets have the best record in the NL. They only got 2 players into the second round of the fan voting, but you feel like they're going to be due for a big contention out in LA in a few weeks. So how many All-Stars do you think the Mets actually get?
I want to say they get 4. I do think that McNeil gets in as a bench player. I wouldn't, again, in Diaz, that's including Diaz. I wouldn't be surprised if Nimmo possibly gets the nod as a bench player just for the season that he's been putting together. Taijuan Walker, I know, he's probably not going to get that call, but he's certainly put together a first half that deserves another All-Star nod. What he's done for this rotation, with just countless injuries to the starting 5 and the numbers he's put up and the consistency that he's shown, he's not going to blow anybody away with strikeouts. He did for a few games there, which is really cool. But absolutely terrific season. Yeah, I think the Mets possibly send 4 out.
Yeah, I feel like Alonso and Diaz are the lot. I think McNeil's probably the best chance to start, though, especially if Ozzie Albies and Jazz Chisholm are both hurt by the time the game comes around. I can see McNeil being the guy who gets picked up to go start that game.
Certainly possible. I'm trying to think of Drew Smith. He probably wasn't getting much buzz, but his numbers were terrific. But there's a lot of really, really good relievers in the National League. It's certainly possible if Adam Ottavino gets a little bit of consideration. I'm not expecting him to get selected, but he's had a really, really nice first half. You can't complain about what he's done. Again, these are all very, very long shot selections, but just kind of throwing names out of guys who have been really, really good.
What about Lindor? You think he has a shot?
I think too many people look at his batting average and say, he's wasting, he's taking that contract and not doing anything. granted, he has slumped at times this season, but he's been able to keep those slumps so short-lived and of course the production when he is hot is just through the roof. I mean, he's still, I think by weighted runs created plus, somewhere around 120, 130, which is 115, 120 possibly. But that's pretty good. And throw in his leadership, throw in his fielding, and I mean that's an all-around. He's an all-star whether he makes the team or not. I think it might be tough unless there's some injuries and people have to get, tabbed. I think McNeil probably has a better shot than Lindor at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. And speaking of one of the Met All-Stars from last year, we have not seen yet is obviously Jacob deGrom. And as of recording, it sounds like he might get a rehab start on Sunday. But one thing I've noticed here is that the Mets have been very mysterious about like his whole timetable, whereas the Max Scherzer were pretty much open with him. It's like, oh, okay, he's doing this, he's going to rehab here, he's going to rehab again. I feel like we get like next to nothing from them on deGrom. Why do you think the difference is with how they're treating him opposed to everybody else?
Well, I think getting Max back out there, considering the injury itself and considering how Scherzer knows his body, and of course the same goes for deGrom, but Max, I think his timetable was 6 to 8 weeks and everybody knew what was going on there. Jacob deGrom is, I think they've always been a little more cautious about letting on too much. I think he's the closest thing this organization has had to a Tom Seaver. And I think that a certain bit of cautious, caution should come along with that. And plus, adding Jacob, I know we've heard this so many times over the years and it's always been hot air, but, adding Jacob deGrom at the trade deadline off the IL, I don't care how it sounds. That's a huge, huge plus. And, even just letting him get back to normal in August. And this is, this could have been the point of view back in March or April or May. Let's just let things progress how they're going to progress. And whatever starts you can get Jacob deGrom out there for, I mean, that's just a huge, huge, huge plus for the Mets. And if he is back to being Jacob deGrom, I mean, forget about it. You go from, a patchwork starting rotation to once again having arguably the best starting five that we've seen in a decade.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I'm also curious about here is obviously we've noticed the last few weeks, actually, that they have a big issue at DH where they're not getting enough production out of guys like J.D. Davis and Dom Smith here. And the deadline's still about a month away here. They have two intriguing prospects down the farm, either in Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez. Obviously, we've heard a lot about them here. Do you think there's going to be a point where the Mets say, okay, let's just bring one of these guys up, see what we have, see if they, A, just catch fire and spark the lineup, and B, sort of give you a sense of, oh, this is what we have, therefore we don't need to go get as much at the deadline?
I think I do kind of expect Dom to be traded just because I think everybody, team and player, both are kind of ready for that. I think Dom's, and this is again, just going off his quotes. I think he's ready, to play every day. And, let's say he theoretically or hypothetically gets included in a Trey Mancini deal. That's going to be a nice opportunity for Dom. He'll play every day. He'll put up decent numbers in Baltimore. He's been in the league for a few years now. He can bring a little veteran leadership to that team. And in a few years, the Orioles are going to be really good. So if any Mets do end up in Baltimore, I'll certainly be rooting for him. But as far as a guy like Vientos, who has spent a little bit of time at first base too, whether it's Dom who gets moved, personally, I don't trade J.D. Davis unless it really makes sense, just because, he has gotten pretty hot over the last few weeks. His slash line, I want to say over the last month is greatly improved compared to what it was earlier in the year. And he's just, he hits the cover off the ball. He's just a line drive machine. They just need to fall. But, I if they do move JD, even, I'll stick to, if they move JD or Dom, I wouldn't be shocked if Vientos gets a call up, if needed. I don't think that they're in that situation where they need to call up a prospect, but he's getting to the point where you can't do too much more in AAA. I'm also very curious to see whether they just include Vientos, considering the push that they're going for seems to be more towards a win now roster, and maybe they're not ready to stick a rookie at a premium position, third base. As a bench player, though, I'd certainly be on board with it, but I don't see them bringing them up to anything more than like a Nick Plummer type situation where, you're needed, you're going to get some at bats, we'll see how you do, and take it from there.
What about Alvarez specifically as catcher? Because obviously they've gotten pretty much nothing from the position all year. I know James McCann just got back. He hasn't hit much for the last year and a half. Nito's great defensively. He's not hit much either. Whereas you could say, okay, Alvarez come up, he'll DH a couple times a week because his bat seems big league ready. He catches once or twice a week. Like, what do you think about that possibility?
I think if another catcher gets hurt, I think they do make that call. I think if McCann and Nito can both stay healthy, I don't think we'll see Alvarez until 2023. But that being said, come spring training next season, he's going to be knocking on that door, rapping on that door. And by all accounts, he deserves it. He's absolutely, hitting just rockets in Double-A. Max Scherzer, who I guess he's pitched to him twice in the last during his rehab stint, had glowing reviews. He said his bat's ready to play in the majors now. I don't have the quote here, but I believe he was very happy with how he caught and called the game. You have to take all this into account, that maybe you catch lightning in a bottle with this guy, and we've seen players go from Double-A straight to the majors and succeed. It's not uncalled for. I mean, it's not unheard of. The catching position is a really tough one to do it from. We've seen guys come up, highly touted backstops come up in recent years and, peter out. I look at Joey Bart. Joey Bart is a terrific hitter, monster for the San Francisco Giants. Heir apparent to Buster Posey. Of course, Buster Posey somewhat unexpectedly retired, and between the injury the year before and then Buster calling it quits, Joey Bart's had a really, really tough time adjusting to major league pitching. And he didn't spend a lot of time in the minors. And this can go for anybody. Look at Jared Kelenic, who played like 19 games at AAA before making his debut. Got absolutely cooked at the major league level. He's back in AAA now, and he's getting his confidence back. He's hitting well. But there's a lot to kind of weigh in these decisions. Like, do you want to... Like I was saying, you might catch lightning in a bottle, and he might hit the ground running at this level. But you also take the chance of stunting his development. And with a talent like this, it's not a chance I'm willing to take. But again, come spring training next season, if he's still on this trajectory, it's kind of hard to deny it.
Absolutely. My last question here is, obviously, we know we have the deadline coming up here in about a month here. They have some clear needs. They need help in the bullpen. They need to get probably another bat or two for the bottom of the lineup here to give themselves a little more pop beyond their top five here. Like, what do you realistically see them doing? You see them, like, using prospects, trying to get big names here? You see them trying to take on money to try and get maybe a guy in a bad contract and be useful here? What do you think they end up doing?
Well, I do think they hold on to most of their big name prospects, and that being, your Alvarez, your Beatties. I still think Ronnie Mauricio stays in the organization. I think that his ceiling is just, ridiculously high. I count, unless the deal is really, really, worth it. I have a feeling that he sticks around, just because I think he's a player. Anyway, I do think that the Trey Mancini deal, I think it was Heyman from, I guess he's with the Post now. I believe he brought it up that the Mets had interest in Baltimore's Trey Mancini. We talked about it a little bit before. I think that's a realistic move. I think he adds DH-type depth. He can take over at first if Dom is included in the deal, at least when Pete gets a DH day or what have you. And I said it on Twitter on Friday, Jorge Lopez, who's a stud reliever for the Orioles, 29 years old, so he's not under contract much longer. Incredible stuff. I see what it takes to kind of get those two in a deal and see kind of where it goes, because those are the type of solidifying moves that kind of check all the boxes they need. I wouldn't be surprised to see if they keep on looking, whether it's another impact bat. I know I don't know if it was just fans tossing around ideas or if it was a report, but Chris Soto. Chris Soto, my buddy from Mesmerized. He brought up the idea of going hard after Luis Castillo, the pitcher from Cincinnati, and also maybe trying to limit costs and taking on a Joey Votto as a DH type deal. That would be fun. I mean, Votto's really struggling this year. Last year he had a monster year. He said he was focusing on more power. I think there's a happy medium there between him trying to hit home runs and him just being the on-base guy that he's always been. And that could play, especially in the postseason where he's been waiting for a real shot his whole career. I wouldn't be totally against that type of player as a DH. Just, depth and quality depth at that. And, I think that could be a very intriguing move.
Absolutely, Tim. Thanks all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, I hope you follow social media, keep up with some of your Mets coverage.
Sure. On Twitter, it's at Timothy R. Ryder. That's R-Y-D-E-R, like the moving truck company. The Apple, that's the Apple NYM on Twitter. If you search for the Apple or Tim Ryder Mets on Google, you'll go right to our Substack newsletter. And the podcast is simply amazing. We definitely come out on Mondays. Sometimes we also come out on Fridays, but that all depends. It's definitely a weekly show, sometimes a semi-weekly show.
Absolutely, Tim. Thanks all the time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Mike. And let's go Mets, pal.